The rain battered the windows of our cramped Brooklyn apartment, a relentless drumbeat that drowned out the world. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, my heart racing as if it knew something I didn't. Then I felt Itha's hand, tentative, brushing mine under the covers, and everything I thought I knew about myself unraveled. I'm Ethan, a 24-year-old graphic designer scraping by in New York City, sharing a shoebox apartment with Caleb, my roommate of 6 months. We met through a Craigslist ad me. The anxious kid from Ohio who overthinks everything. Him. The confident, enigmatic photographer with a smile that could stop traffic. Our lives collided in this 600-square-foot space, where every day was a dance of avoiding each other's mess and pretending we weren't studying each other too closely. That night, the storm had knocked out the power, leaving us with candles and a shared blanket on the couch. Caleb had suggested we huddle for warmth, his voice casual, but his eyes flickering with something heavier. I laughed it off, but my pulse betrayed me, thumping loud enough I swore he could hear it. We talked for hours about his dreams of a gallery show, my fear of never being enough, the way the city chews up hope and spits it out. Somewhere between his stories of growing up in Seattle and my confessions about my rigid, religious upbringing, the air shifted. His hand found mine, and I didn't pull away. I'd spent years building walls, telling myself I was straight, that the feelings I buried in high school were just a phase. My family's church preached love but condemned anything that didn't fit their mold. I'd internalized it, carried it like a weight. Until Caleb. He was everything I wasn't: bold, unapologetic, openly bi, with a laugh that made me want to believe in something bigger. His touch was a question, and for the first time, I didn't have an answer. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the cracked blinds, and Caleb was still there, his head resting on my shoulder. I should have panicked, should have pushed him away, but I didn't. Instead, I memorized the weight of him, the warmth, the way his breath steadied my own. We didn't talk about it. Not then. But the silence was loud, full of possibilities I wasn't ready to name. Days passed, and the apartment felt different, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. Caleb started lingering longer at the breakfast table, his knee brushing mine under it. I caught myself watching him how he'd hum while editing photos, how his fingers moved with precision over his camera. I told myself it was nothing, just roommates getting close. But every night, I lay awake, wondering if he'd reach for me again. One evening, he came home late, his jacket soaked from the rain, his eyes stormy. "I got rejected from another gallery," he said, tossing his bag onto the floor. His voice was raw, not just from the rejection, but from something deeper. I wanted to fix it, to tell him he was brilliant, but words felt too small. Instead, I handed him a beer, sat beside him, and let the silence speak. His hand found mine again, and this time, I squeezed back. We started testing boundaries, small moments that felt like confessions. A shared coffee mug, his head on my lap during a movie. The way he'd say my name, soft and deliberate, like it was something precious. I was falling, and it terrified me. My family's voice echoed in my head: sin, shame, hellfire, but Caleb's presence was louder, drowning it out. Then came the night that changed everything. We were at a dive bar in Williamsburg, surrounded by hipsters and neon lights. Caleb was laughing, his arms slung around my shoulders, when a drunk guy at the bar sneered. Fags. The word hit like a punch, and I froze, my old fears rushing back. Caleb didn't flinch. He turned, stared the guy down, and said, "Yeah. And what?" His defiance was electric. But I was shaking, caught between wanting to stand with him and wanting to disappear. Back at the apartment, I couldn't look at him. "Ethan," he said, his voice low, "you don't have to hide." He stepped closer, his hand on my cheek, and I felt the world tilt. I wanted to kiss him, to let go of the fear, but the weight of my past held me back. "I can't," I whispered, and the hurt in his eyes cut deeper than the stranger's slur. For a week, we tiptoed around each other. I buried myself in work, sketching logos until my hands ached, while Caleb stayed out late, his camera bag slung over his shoulder. The apartment felt empty, even when we were both there. I missed the way we'd been, the way he made me feel alive. But I didn't know how to cross the chasm I'd created. One night, I found him on the couch, staring at a photo on his laptop, a candid shot of me, laughing, my guard down. "You're beautiful when you're not overthinking," he said, not looking up. My throat tightened. I sat beside him, closer than I meant to, and said, "I'm scared." He turned, his eyes soft but steady. "Me too. But I'm not going anywhere." That night, under the covers, his hand found mine again. This time, I pulled him closer, and we stayed there, tangled together, until morning. It wasn't just about desire, it was about trust, about choosing each other despite the world's judgment. For the first time, I felt like I could breathe. The weeks that followed were a blur of stolen moments and unspoken promises. Caleb and I were navigating something fragile, like walking on a frozen lake, each step testing whether it would hold. The city buzzed around us, oblivious to the revolution happening in our tiny apartment. I started noticing the little things: how Caleb left sticky notes with doodles on my laptop, how he'd make extra coffee just for me. One morning, I woke to find him sketching in the kitchen, his brow furrowed in concentration. "What's that?" I asked, peering over his shoulder. It was a photo of us from the bar, my head tilted back in laughter, his arm around me. "It's us," he said simply, and my heart stuttered. But the world wasn't as kind as our apartment. My sister, Rachel, called one afternoon, her voice tight with concern. "Mom's been asking about you," she said. "She's worried you're different." The word hung heavy, laced with the judgment I'd grown up dreading. I told her I was fine, but the lie tasted bitter. I hadn't come out to my family, hadn't even come out to myself. Not fully. Caleb was the only truth I was sure of, and even that felt like a risk. At work, I was distracted, my designs lackluster. My boss, a no-nonsense woman named Carla, pulled me aside. "Ethan, you're slipping." "What's going on?" I wanted to tell her about Caleb, about the way he made me feel seen, but the words caught in my throat. Instead, I mumbled something about stress and promised to do better. That night, I came home to find Caleb waiting, his camera in hand. "Let's get out of here," he said. "Just you and me." We ended up at Coney Island, the boardwalk alive with lights and laughter. Caleb snapped photos of the Ferris wheel, the waves, me. "You're my favorite subject," he teased, and I blushed, shoving him playfully. For a few hours, it was just us. No judgment, no fear. We shared a cotton candy, our fingers sticky and tangled. And when he kissed me under the neon glow of a game stall, it felt like the world finally made sense. But reality crept back. A text from my dad. "We're coming to visit next month." My stomach dropped. My parents were devout, their beliefs rigid as stone. They'd never understand Caleb, never accept us. I showed him the text, expecting him to pull back, but he just took my hand. "We'll figure it out," he said, and I wanted to believe him. The next day, Caleb got a Cali gallery in Manhattan, wanted to feature his work. His face lit up, and I felt a surge of pride, but also fear. His world was expanding, and I was still stuck, wrestling with who I was. That night, we celebrated at a rooftop bar, the city sprawling below us. He raised a glass, his eyes locked on mine. "To us," he said, and I clinked my glass against his. But my smile faltered. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was holding him back. Back home, we fell into bed, our bodies pressed close. But my mind was racing. What if I can't do this? I whispered into the dark. Caleb's hand stilled on my back. "You can," he said, his voice firm. "But you have to want it." His words were a challenge, one I wasn't sure I could meet. The days before my parents' visit were tense. I avoided Caleb's touch, not because I didn't want it, but because it felt like a betrayal of the life I'd left behind. He noticed. Of course. "Talk to me, Ethan," he said one night, his voice breaking. I wanted to, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I kissed him, hard and desperate, hoping it would say what I couldn't. When my parents arrived, the apartment felt like a minefield. My mom's eyes scanned the space, lingering on Caleb's photos pinned to the Phrygius. Laughing. "Too close." "Nice place," she said, but her tone was cold. My dad was quieter, his silence heavier. Caleb was polite, charming even, but I saw the strain in his smile. Dinner was a tightrope walk, every word measured. When my mom asked about my roommate situation, I choked on my water, and Caleb's hand brushed mine under the table, grounding me. After they left, I collapsed onto the couch, exhausted. Caleb sat beside me, his expression unreadable. "You're not alone in this," he said, but I could hear the hurt in his voice. I wanted to tell him I was all in, that I'd fight for us, but the fear was still there, clawing at me. That night, we slept apart, the space between us colder than the storm that started it all. The distance between us grew, not in miles, but in moments. Caleb's gallery show was a week away, and he was a whirlwind of energy, editing photos late into the night. I watched him from the doorway, wanting to bridge the gap, but not knowing how. My parents' visit had left me raw, their unspoken disapproval lingering like smoke. I'd spent my life trying to be the son they wanted, straight, devout, predictable. But Caleb had cracked that facade. And now I was caught between two versions of myself, the one they raised and the one he saw. I started staying late at work, avoiding the apartment, avoiding him. It was easier than facing the truth. One night, I came home to find Caleb packing his camera gear, his movements sharp. "You're never here anymore," he said, not looking at me. The accusation stung because it was true. "I'm trying," I said, but it sounded weak, even to me. He turned, his eyes blazing. "Trying what, Ethan?" "To pretend this didn't happen. To pretend you don't feel it." I wanted to argue, to tell him he was wrong, but the words died in my throat. Instead, I walked away, shutting my bedroom door behind me. The next day, I found a note on the counter, "Gallery show. Friday. Come if you want." It wasn't an invitation. It was a dare. I spent the week wrestling with it, my fear warring with my need to see him shine. By Friday, I was a mess. My sketches at work a chaotic blur of lines and mistakes. Carla noticed again, her patience thinning. "Fix whatever's breaking you," she said, "or you're out." Her words echoed Caleb's challenge, and I knew I couldn't keep running. The gallery was packed, a sleek space in Chelsea filled with artsy types sipping wine. Caleb's photos lined the walls, vibrant, raw, alive. I spotted the one of me, blown up large, my laughter frozen in time. The caption read, "Courage in motion." I stood there, stunned, as strangers murmured about the emotion in the shot. Then I saw him across the room, talking to a curator, his smile bright but strained. Our eyes met, and for a moment, the crowd disappeared. I approached, my heart pounding. "You used my photo?" I said, my voice barely steady. He shrugged, but his eyes were searching. "It's the best one I've got." The air between us crackled, and I wanted to say everything: how I was sorry, how I was scared, how I loved him. But before I could, a woman interrupted, gushing about his work. He turned away, and I felt the moment slip. I wandered the gallery, each photo a piece of Caleb's soul. There was one of us on Coney Island, my face half hidden by cotton candy, his eyes soft with something unspoken. I realized then how much he'd been carrying his own fears, his own risks, all while waiting for me to catch up. I found him outside, smoking a cigarette, the city lights reflecting in his eyes. "I'm here," I said, and he looked at me, skeptical. "Are you?" he asked. I stepped closer, my hand brushing his. "I'm trying to be." He exhaled, the smoke curling between us. "I can't keep waiting. Ethan, I need you to choose." His voice was steady, but I saw the crack in his armor, the fear that I'd let him down. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying his words. Choose. It sounded so simple, but it meant dismantling everything I'd been taught, everything I'd believed about myself. I thought of my parents, their disappointment. I thought of Caleb, his hand in mine, his belief in me. For the first time, I let myself imagine a life where I didn't hide. The next morning, I found him in the kitchen, editing photos. I sat across from him, my hands shaking. "I'm in," I said, the words heavy but true. He looked up, his expression guarded. "You sure?" I nodded, and for the first time in weeks, he smiled, real and unguarded. We didn't touch, didn't kiss, but the air felt lighter, like a storm had passed. The days that followed were tentative, like relearning a language we'd forgotten. We cooked dinner together, laughed over bad TV, and slowly, the distance closed. But the world wasn't done testing us. A letter arrived from my parents. Formal and cold. "We're praying for you. Ethan. Come home." It was a summons. A demand to return to the life I'd left. I showed it to Caleb, expecting him to pull back. But he just held me, his arms a quiet defiance. The letter sat on the counter for days. A silent accusation. I avoided it, but its weight followed me, creeping into every moment. Caleb noticed. Of course, they always did. "You can't ignore it forever," he said one night, his voice gentle but firm. I knew he was right, but the thought of facing my parents, of telling them who I was, felt like stepping off a cliff. We were closer now, but not without cracks. Caleb was patient, but I saw the worry in his eyes when I hesitated to hold his hand in public or flinched at a stranger's stare. I was trying, but trying wasn't enough. I wanted to be the person he deserved, someone unafraid, but the fear was a shadow I couldn't shake. One evening, we went to a queer open mic night in the East Village, a cozy spot filled with poets and singers spilling their truths. Caleb had signed up to read, and I watched, nervous, as he took the stage. His voice was steady, his words raw, a poem about love, about fighting for it, about the boy who was still learning to fight. I knew it was about me, and my throat tightened as the crowd snapped their fingers in approval. Afterward, he found me in the back, his eyes bright. "Your turn next time," he teased, but I saw the hope in his gaze, the wish that I'd claim this part of myself. I started therapy, a small step I didn't tell Caleb about at first. The therapist, a kind woman named Dr. Ellis, listened as I unraveled years of guilt and fear. "You're allowed to be happy," she said, and the words hit harder than I expected. I thought of Caleb, of the life we could have if I let go. But letting go meant confronting my family, and that was a battle I wasn't sure I could win. Caleb's gallery show had opened doors, and he was busier now, meeting with curators and planning a second exhibit. I was proud, but the distance between our worlds felt wider. He was out, proud, living his truth, while I was still hiding, dodging questions from coworkers and family. One night, he came home late, his face lit with excitement. "I got a grant," he said, pulling me into a hug. "I'm going to Seattle for a project." My heart sank. Seattle was his home, his past, a place where he could be himself without my baggage. "How long?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "A month. Maybe 2, he said, searching my face. "Come with me." The invitation was a lifeline, but also a test. I wanted to say yes, to pack a bag and follow him. But the thought of leaving my job, my life, my parents' expectations, it was too much. I need time, I said, and his face fell, though he nodded. Okay, he said, but the word was heavy with disappointment. The apartment felt emptier as he prepared to leave. I helped him pack, folding his clothes, avoiding his eyes. The night before his flight, we lay in bed, his head on my chest. I love you, he said, the first time either of us had said it. The words were a gift, but also a weight, because I couldn't say them back. Not yet. I held him tighter, hoping it was enough. He left for Seattle the next morning, his camera bag slung over his shoulder, his smile strained. Call me, he said, and I nodded. But as the door closed, I felt the chasm widen. The apartment was too quiet. The letter from my parents still on the counter. I opened it, rereading their words, "Come home." I knew what they meant, not just Ohio, but their version of me, the one who didn't love Caleb. I threw myself into work, hoping it would drown out the ache. Carla noticed the change. My design's sharper now, fueled by desperation. Better, she said, but her approval felt hollow. I called Caleb every night, his voice a lifeline across the miles. He told me about Seattle, the rain, the art scene. But I heard the question in his pauses, "Are you still in?" I wanted to be, but the fear was relentless. One night, drunk on cheap wine, I called Rachel. "I'm in love," I blurted, the words spilling out before I could stop them. There was silence. Then her voice, soft but cautious. "With who?" I told her about Caleb, about the way he made me feel alive, about the fear that was choking me. She listened, and when she finally spoke, it wasn't what I expected. "You deserve to be happy, Ethan," she said. "But you have to tell Mom and Dad." Rachel's words echoed in my head, a challenge I couldn't ignore. I spent days drafting a letter to my parents, each version more honest than the last. But I couldn't bring myself to send it. Instead, I called Caleb, needing his voice to anchor me. "I miss you," I said, and he laughed, soft and warm. "Miss you too. But you're dodging something, aren't you?" He knew me too well. Seattle was changing him. I could hear it. His voice was lighter, his stories full of new friends, new opportunities. I was happy for him, but the distance, physical and emotional, was a weight I carried alone. I started going to queer community events, small steps toward understanding myself. At a support group, I listened to others share their coming out stories, their triumphs and losses. One guy, older, with kind eyes, said, "The hardest part is choosing yourself." I thought of Caleb, of the life we could have, and felt a spark of resolve. Work was a distraction, but not enough. Carla gave me a big projector rebrand for a local nonprofit, and I poured myself into it, sketching late into the night. The designs were bold, personal, inspired by Caleb's photos, by the courage I wanted to find. When I presented them, Carla's eyes widened. "This is you," she said. "This is what I've been waiting for." For the first time, I felt like I was building something real, not just for work, but for myself. Caleb sent me a Packagia print of the Coney Island photo, framed, with a note, "You're braver than you think." I hung it above my desk. A reminder of him. Of us. We talk less now. His schedule packed. And each call left me aching. I wanted to tell him I loved him. But the words felt like a promise I wasn't sure I could keep. My parents called. Their voices tense. "We're coming back to New York," my mom said. "We need to talk." Panic surged. But so did something else, anger. I was tired of hiding. Tired of their expectations crushing me. I told Dr. Ellis. And she nodded. "You're ready," she said. "Not because you're not scared, but because you're choosing to move through it." The day they arrived, I was a wreck. Caleb was still in Seattle, and I felt his absence like a missing limb. My parents sat across from me in a coffee shop, their faces stern. "We're worried about you," my dad said. "This city, these influences." I knew what he meant. And for once, I didn't back down. "I'm gay," I said, the words sharp and clear. "And I'm in love with Caleb." The silence was deafening. Their faces frozen. My mom's eyes filled with tears. Not of joy, but of loss. My dad stood, his voice low. "We need time." They left without another word, and I felt both broken and free. I called Caleb, my voice shaking. "I did it," I said. "I told them." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "I'm so proud of you." His voice cracked, and I realized he was crying. "Come to Seattle," he said again. And this time, I didn't hesitate. "Okay." I booked a flight, my hands trembling as I clicked purchase. The nonprofit project was wrapping up, and Carla gave me her blessing. "Go live your life," she said, and I felt a weight lift. The night before I left, I sat in the apartment, the Coney Island photo glowing in the lamplight. I was scared, but for the first time. It wasn't fear holding me back, it was fear pushing me forward. Seattle was rain-soaked and vibrant, just like Caleb had described. He met me at the airport, his smile brighter than I remembered. We didn't speak, just hugged, his arms tight around me. "You're here," he said, and I nodded, tears stinging my eyes. "I'm here." That night, we walked through Pike Place Market, the air sharp with salt and coffee. He showed me his new photos, his passion spilling over. I told him about my parents, about the pain and the freedom of finally speaking my truth. He listened, his hand in mine, and when he kissed me under a street lamp, it felt like a promise we'd both keep. Seattle was a new world, one where Caleb thrived and I was learning to. His apartment was small, cluttered with prints and camera gear, but it felt like home the moment I stepped inside. We spent days exploring the city, coffee shops, bookstores, rainy hikes through the forest. Each moment was a step toward the life I'd been afraid to claim. But the weight of my parents' reaction lingered. I checked my phone obsessively, hoping for a message, a sign they'd come around. Nothing came. Caleb saw the hurt, even when I tried to hide it. One night, as we lay in bed, he traced circles on my back. "They might need time," he said. But you don't have to wait for them to live. His words were a lifeline, but the ache remained. I found a freelance gig designing posters for a local arts festival, and it kept me busy while Caleb worked on his project. We fell into a rhythm, cooking dinner together, stealing kisses between tasks. But there were moments of tension, me hesitation to be open in public, my fear of what others thought. Caleb was patient, but I saw the strain. The way he'd look away when I pulled my hand from his in a crowded cafe. One evening, we went to a queer film festival, a small theater packed with couples holding hands. The movie was about love, loss, and fighting for who you are. I felt Caleb's eyes on me, and when the credits rolled, he leaned close. That's us, he whispered. We're the ones who keep fighting. I nodded, my throat tight, and took his hand, not caring who saw. Back in New York, Rachel texted, "Mom's struggling, but she's asking about you." It wasn't much, but it was something. I showed Caleb, and he squeezed my shoulder. It's a start, he said. I wanted to believe him, but the uncertainty gnawed at me. I threw myself into my work, the festival posters earning praise from the organizers. Caleb framed one, hanging it next to his photos, a quiet claim of our shared life. His project was wrapping up, and talk turned to what came next. I could stay here, he said one night, his voice cautious. Or we could go back to New York. Together. The choice felt monumental, a test of whether I was ready to build a life with him. I thought of Brooklyn, our apartment, the memories we'd made. New York, I said, and his smile was worth every fear I'd faced. We planned our return. But first, Caleb had one last shoot, a series of portraits in a community center for queer youth. I went with him, watching as he coaxed smiles from nervous teens, his camera a bridge between their fears and their hopes. One kid, a shy 16-year-old named Alex, reminded me of myself, scared, hiding, but wanting to be seen. I talked to him, shared a piece of my story, and saw his shoulders relax. Caleb caught my eye, his expression soft with pride. That night, we celebrated the end of his project at a bar overlooking the Puget Sound. The water glittered under the stars, and Caleb raised a glass. To us, he said, echoing our night in New York. This time, I said it back, to us. The words felt like a vow, one I was ready to keep. But the past wasn't done with us. A call from Rachel came the next morning, her voice urgent. Mom's in the hospital. Heart attack. My world tilted. Caleb booked us flights back to New York, his hand steady in mine as we boarded. The flight was a blur, my mind racing with guilt and fear. I hadn't spoken to my mom since I came out, and now I might never get the chance. We landed in New York, the city as relentless as ever. At the hospital, Rachel met us, her eyes red. She's stable, she said, but her voice shook. Caleb stayed by my side, his presence a quiet strength. When I saw my mom, pale and small in the hospital bed, my heart broke. She looked at me, then at Caleb, and for the first time, I saw something softer in her eyes, not acceptance. Not yet, but a crack in the wall. The hospital was a maze of white walls and beeping machines, each sound a reminder of how fragile everything was. My mom's recovery was slow, and I spent hours by her side, torn between hope and the weight of our last conversation. Caleb was there every day, bringing coffee, cracking jokes to make Rachel smile. But I saw the toll it took on him. The way he'd stare out the window when he thought I wasn't looking. My dad was quieter now, his judgment softened by fear. One afternoon, as we sat in the waiting room, he spoke. "I don't understand you," he said, his voice low. "But I don't want to lose you." It wasn't an apology, but it was a start. I nodded, unable to speak, and Caleb squeezed my hand, grounding me. Mom was released after a week. Weak but alive. At their hotel, she asked about Caleb, her voice hesitant. "He's good to you," she said, and I nodded, my throat tight. "He's everything." She didn't reply, but her silence felt different, like she was wrestling with something new. I didn't push, but I felt a flicker of hope. Back in Brooklyn, our apartment was a refuge, but it carried ghosts of our past fights, fears, the letter I'd ignored. Caleb and I were closer, but the strain of the past months lingered. One night, as we cooked dinner, he stopped, his knife hovering over a carrot. "Are we okay?" he asked, and the question cut deep. I wanted to say yes, but I knew he deserved more. "We're trying," I said, and he nodded, but his eyes were distant. I went back to therapy, digging deeper into the fear that still clung to me. Dr. Ellis pushed me to confront it, to name what I wanted. "I want him," I said, the words simple but heavy. "And I want to be someone he's proud of." She smiled. "Then be that person." Caleb's second gallery show was approaching, and he asked me to help curate it. I poured myself into it, selecting photos, designing the layout. The centerpiece was the portrait of me, courage in motion, now joined by a new Onius. On a Seattle rooftop, our faces lit with laughter. The caption read, "Home is you." I cried when I saw it, and Caleb pulled me close, his lips brushing my forehead. The show was a success, the gallery buzzing with praise. Strangers congratulated me, not just for the layout, but for the story the photos told. Caleb stood beside me, his hand in mine, and for the first time, I didn't flinch at the stares. I was still scared, but I was choosing him, choosing us. Every day, my parents called, asking to meet. We went to a diner, the same one where I'd come out to them. My mom's eyes lingered on our joined hands, and she didn't look away. "I'm trying to understand," she said, her voice soft. My dad nodded, his silence a concession. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress, and I held on to it. That night, Caleb and I sat on our couch, the city humming outside. "I love you," I said, the words finally free. He smiled, his eyes shining. "Took you long enough." We laughed, and when he kissed me, it felt like a promise we'd both keep, no matter what came next. But life doesn't pause for happy moments. A week later, Caleb got an offer a year-long residency in Paris. It was his dream, The kind of opportunity he'd spent years chasing. "I want you to come," he said, but his voice was cautious, like he knew what I'd say. I thought of my job, my family, the fragile bridge we built. "I can't," I said, and the words broke us both. He didn't argue, but the silence was heavy. We spent his last weeks in New York clinging to each other, every touch a reminder of what we might lose. The night before he left, we lay in bed, his hand in mine. "This isn't goodbye," he said, but his eyes betrayed him. I nodded, tears falling, and held him until morning. Caleb's absence was a hole I couldn't fill. The apartment felt too big, too quiet. Every corner a memory of him. I threw myself into work, my design sharper, more honest, earning me a promotion. Carla clapped me on the back, but her praise couldn't touch the ache. We talked every day at first, video calls filled with laughter and longing. But as weeks turned to months, the calls grew shorter, his life in Paris pulling him away. I saw his photos online, new faces, new places, a world I wasn't part of. I was proud, but the distance hurt, and I wondered if I'd made the wrong choice. My parents were trying. Slowly. Mom sent a card, her handwriting shaky. "We love you." Dad called, awkward but earnest, asking about my work, even about Caleb. Rachel visited, her hug fierce. "You're doing good," she said, and I clung to that. I kept going to queer events, finding community, finding myself. But every step forward felt incomplete without him. One night, I found a box under the couch, photos Caleb had left behind. Candids of us. Moments I'd forgotten. I sat there, crying, laughing, missing him. I booked a flight to Paris, not telling him, needing to see him, to know if we still had a chance. Paris was overwhelming, its beauty sharp against my nerves. I found Caleb at his gallery, his photos lining the walls, as vibrant as ever. He saw me, and his face lit up, then faltered, like he wasn't sure it was real. "Ethan," he said, and I crossed the room, pulling him into a hug. "I'm here," I said, echoing Seattle, echoing us. We spent the day walking the Seine, talking, laughing, crying. He told me about Paris, about the pressure, the loneliness. I told him about New York, about my family, about choosing myself. "I love you," I said, and this time, he kissed me, slow and sure, under a bridge as the city hummed around us. He had 6 months left in Paris, and I couldn't stay. We made a plan, long distance, visits, a future we'd build together. It wasn't easy, but it was ours. Back in New York, I hung his Paris photos next to ours, a reminder of what we were fighting for. Months later, Caleb came home. We met at the airport, his camera bag slung over his shoulder, his smile tired but real. We didn't speak, just held each other, the world falling away. Back in our apartment, we fell into bed, his hand finding mine under the covers, just like that first night. But this time, I wasn't afraid. I'd chosen him, chosen us, and that was enough. The years ahead wouldn't be easy, family. Work. The world's judgment, but we'd face them together. My parents were learning, slowly, to love all of me. My designs were bolder, my voice stronger. And Caleb, my Caleb, was by my side, his laughter my home. We'd reached for each other in the dark, and we'd stayed, not just for a night, but for a lifetime.